it's not always just sadness. You'll see a lot of irritability in kids that are depressed. This goes for adolescents as well. You'll see a lot of that irritability. You'll see a lot of anger. You might see a lot of a sensitivity to perceived failures or perceived rejection. You'll see changes in a child or a teen's eating patterns and sleeping patterns. So maybe the child's not wanting to eat a lot, or maybe they're eating a lot more than they used to. When it comes to sleeping, maybe the child isn't sleeping as much as they should be or that they used to be sleeping. Maybe they're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. Or maybe it's the opposite end of the spectrum, where they're sleeping a lot more than they used to. You also see a decline in grades. And this can be pretty sudden with kids that are feeling depressed. You can see increases in aggression sometimes. You might also see in kids a lot of physical complaints, or maybe they used to love going to soccer practice or dance practice, and they're not going anymore. They're not wanting to socialize with their friends. One of the hallmark features of depression is just not being able to find joy in things that you used to find joy in. When you get to the teenage years, you might see some other difficulties that come up, such as reckless behaviors, substance abuse. And it could be an increase in substance use, or maybe even starting substance use as a way to cope with the feelings that the teen's having. You might also see self-harm behaviors, so things like cutting, burning, scratching, things along those lines. Some factors that are related to depression have to do with family history, and that's a big one. About 40% of the variability in depression actually has to do with having a family history of it. So this is if, a mom or some other relative, especially a first-degree relative, has had a history of a mood disorder such as depression. There are also biological factors and genetic factors that play a role. And then there are also environmental factors. So things like illness of a loved one, the loss of a loved one. It could be dating problems. It could be problems at school, such as a conflict with a teacher. It could be bullying at school or at home or somewhere within the neighborhood as well. So with suicide, a lot of times people feel like it's kind of coming out of the blue. They didn't really see somebody thinking about or wanting to hurt or kill themselves. But there are actually a lot of signs that do lead up to a person wanting or even attempting to kill themselves. So one of the biggest ones is the individual just talking, writing, or hinting about suicide. It could be joking around about it. It could be, in papers, creative writing classes, maybe it's a little more morbid the material than it typically was. You might see little notes jotted down. It could also be things online, posts on social media or websites that the individual is going to, maybe looking up ways about to kill him or herself. Other factors include previous suicide attempts, and that's a big one as well. If a child or adolescent has attempted previously, then the chances are greater that they're going to attempt again. If the person talks about feeling like they don't have any purpose in life, or they feel like they're a burden on others, or they feel like they're not really contributing to anything, that's a big sign as well. They could be self-harming, and it can start off as self-harming and potentially progress to suicide attempts. So I know as a parent or as an educator, it can feel like there's nothing that you can do to help this child or this teen. But keep in mind that there is a lot that you can do. So as a parent, you can just check in with your child. Make sure that you're having these regular check-ins where you're just talking about things, and not necessarily just about feelings of being sad or suicidal, just all aspects of their lives. You can also encourage your child to spend more time with you. So when people are feeling depressed, they kind of tend to isolate. They want to be left alone a little bit. And so while we can always use a little bit of alone time, sometimes the problem with depressed and suicidal individuals is they have too much of that alone time. And so helping them to feel like they're a part of a community, part of the family, is going to be really important. Making sure that you praise them for things that they're doing well. Oftentimes we get so caught up in our lives that we just let those good things go and we focus on those negatives. Anytime our child acts up or they do something they're not supposed to do, we kind of get on them. But when it comes to when they're doing what they're supposed to do, we kind of forget about it and we just don't even bring attention to it. So making sure that we are telling our kids that we recognize when they're doing things well, and that will help them to feel a little bit less like they can't do anything right. And then in general, just knowing when to seek help, when to go to a professional, when to decide if you need an additional person to come in and help your child. And then knowing also resources like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number.